You introduce yourself to our readers.
Sure. My name is Paul Morris, and back in 1987, or 86 and 87, I was a conscript in the old SADF. And I was, in 1987, sent to Angola to fight in the war there. And recently I went back and did a long bicycle ride through Angola to make peace with Angola and people and myself.
Thank you so much. Okay. Can you share with our readers how you traveled your life journey up to this end?
Well, I was obviously very young when I went into the army. I went straight from school, and it was a 2-year conscription, so that was when I was 19 and 20. So a lot has happened to me between then and now. So when I came out of the army, I went to university, and I spent some time traveling in different parts of the world, and then eventually I had a career as a human resources manager. But throughout that whole time, I was still troubled by the war and my experiences during the war. So this was a thread throughout my life. The war was 27 years ago now, so it was a long journey.
What prompted you to join this career, the writing career?
Well, writing is one of the things that I do. It's not really the main thing, but it's kind of a sideline thing I do. I think I've always been a writer, even if I haven't always been publishing. So I've done some travel writing on and off over the years, and then just writing for pleasure, because I just enjoy reading. I read a lot of books, and writing is just something that I do naturally. And then when I decided I was going to do this journey, I wanted to, this bicycle journey through Angola, I wanted to share my experience with a much wider audience, because I think there's many South African people struggling with the effects of conflict. And I hoped that if I could share it, I could help people understand the kind of experience that I had and many other, white conscripts, but also more broadly in a country that is quite traumatized.
Thank you. What else could you be doing if you were not a writer?
Well, I have another career as well. So I worked as a human resources manager, and then decided that I didn't want to work in that field anymore. So I went and trained. I went back and studied a degree in psychotherapy. So I'm also in London. When I lived in London for a while, I trained as a psychotherapist. So that's my other career. But I think I've always been a writer, and no matter what I do, I'm still writing things.
You look so much, you have a passion of writing. What lessons do some of your books have for the youth?
Sure. I think probably for me, there's something about choices, the choices that you make in life. So it didn't seem like there was much of a choice in 1985 when I was finishing school, because the law said that I had to go in the army or I had to go to jail for 6 years. So I had to choose between army or jail, and there was another choice, which would be to leave the country, effectively going to exile, really. But as a 17, 18-year-old, it was a very difficult decision to leave my family and friends to go and live in a foreign country where I didn't know anyone. But that was still, the choice was still there. It just didn't feel like much of a choice at the time. So then that choice resulted in me going to war and being a soldier, and then spending the rest of my life dealing with that. And then the other choice was to go back to Angola to confront some of the last difficulties I had with the war, which is what I did in 2012 when returned to Angola. Before that, just before I went back, I think I made a decision that I wanted to meet men and women who had fought for the liberation movements and who had fought on the other side, to try and understand their stories. So I guess it was a choice there to reach out to people who were my former enemies, if you like. And they weren't really my enemies, they were my fellow countrymen, many of them. But the political system made us enemies. So I met various liberation fighters from SWAPO Plan, Mkhonto weSizwe. I met a Cuban when I was in Carnaval who had fought. He was working there now as an electrical contractor, but in 1987 he was fighting for the Cubans and the Angolans against the SADF. So my choices were about sort of, I suppose, positive, trying to create positive outcomes after that military experience, to try and make peace with my past, reach out to people who were my former enemies. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What were your dreams at childhood?
Sure. It's interesting because when I was very young, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly airplanes, but then I couldn't really do maths very well. So I needed mathematics, and I couldn't. So I suppose I couldn't realize that dream. But then later on, I wanted to be a journalist. And then when I was in the army, maybe it was because of the war, I decided that I didn't want to be a journalist anymore, and I went and studied other things at university. And then now in later life, I come back to writing. So I suppose my natural pull was towards writing, and I've come back to that, which is quite nice.
You know, some people do some of these things because somebody has inspired you somehow. Who inspired you into writing?
Probably every author I've ever read. I've always read a lot. I think reading, when I was a child, reading was my escape, because I didn't enjoy school, but I used to enjoy reading. So reading was a way of escaping. So it was my way of dreaming. And I suppose, as being someone who really enjoys books and reading, my ambition was always to write a book myself. So I think every time I read a book, it was like, my possibility of writing one myself was there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In your view, is the government doing much to tap youth into writing career?
I really don't know. I'm not in touch with young people. I don't have children, and I really don't know what the government's doing.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Out there are book publishers who have informative books, but they find it difficult to sell their books. What advice can you give them so that they can find a lucrative market?
I think the market needs to be... the market is around people who love books and love reading. And I think it's difficult for the publishers to create that. If people don't want to read, then the market's not there. I think perhaps the publishers could be finding a way of encouraging reading at a very young age, and perhaps encouraging parents to read to their children when they're very young, so children start appreciating how wonderful reading and books can be. In saying that, I don't know, maybe there's more that can be done to publish local writers, publish writers who are writing about things that people who are not currently reading can relate to. Maybe something that, writers that are writing about the grassroots and issues of everyday people, rather than sort of middle-class white people writing like me.
Thank you. Are you married?
Yes.
And how do you balance your work? Because writing demands a lot of time. How do you balance your work and the writing?
Well, the good thing about writing is it doesn't depend on anybody else, so I can write whenever I feel like. When I have time and space, I can write. It's flexible. Whereas, if I had to deal with other people, I have to be, in an office at different times of the day. When I see my clients who come to me for coaching, I have to be available at a particular time. But writing, I can, whenever I feel in the mood, I can fit it in.
Okay, thank you. No, your last word of advice to our readers. What would be anything else we want to say to our readers? Anything about writing? Anything about reading?
I think my book is about peacemaking, really. Peacemaking with myself and with other people and with the landscape and with my past. And I think the thing that I would encourage people to do is to find a way of crossing divides between people, find a way of listening to what other people are saying. I think my book is also about listening to myself and understanding myself, but also trying to understand where other people come from, trying to say, sometimes I don't have to agree with your interpretation of the past or your interpretation of the present, but I want to hear what you think and what you have to say, because we come from a country that's very split by conflict. And by really listening to other people, we can find an easier way of dialoguing with each other, of solving our problems.
Thank you so much. That ends our interview. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.